Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. So first up for T&D today, again, I have been recently criticized and yelled at for my mug collection. So I've started diving into some more of my fiance's mugs. I'm getting into the ones that she really likes, and so she might get mad at me for using them. But this is her highly cherished and treasured, she likes it a lot, mug of Shakespearean insults. Yep, that's what that is. Nope, not insults. This is the Shakespearean pickup lines. Unclear. Sexual innuendos, one of those things. It's a Shakespearean thing, dirty thing, I'm pretty sure. She likes this mug a lot, and it's pretty funny, even though I don't really understand most of them. Inside of it, we have Tension Tamer, because it's the end of the day. It's been a long day. You know, you gotta have a little bit of tension tamed in your brain every once in a while. That's the end of that sentence. Anyway, getting into what we're actually talking about today. Today, we are going to be talking about what to do with all of those extra characters you have kicking around in your head. How to take your stockpile of characters and turn them into something useful. This episode is obviously going to be geared more towards DMs than players, but this is also good advice for players if you have a stockpile of characters that you are excited to play at some point, but you want to get them out in the world a little bit faster, so you can go ahead and DM like a one-shot or something. Gasp. So let's go ahead and let's talk about it a little bit, shall we? Let's go. So, I don't know about you, but I have an extensive backlog of characters. And by backlog, I just mean a log of characters, because at this point, it's not even something that I could feasibly overcome if I were to stop creating characters. Well, I could feasibly overcome it if I stopped creating characters entirely, but we all know that that is simply not going to happen. On my D&D Beyond account, I have a grand total of 109 characters built. I believe I have used 3 of those in as a player in different campaigns and or one shots. I believe that is it. We scroll down a lot of rows before I even hit one that is added to a campaign. So, like, to be clear, we got a lot of them in here, and this is after I have cleaned out several of them, because they were repeats or things that I just like started and never finished. But I did pare it down to be the ones that I have actually completed a character sheet for, and there's 109 of them. So there's that. But that said, while I have 109 characters in here, and I have, conceived of each of them individually at different points in time, there are a lot of them in here that I have used as a DM, and have gotten to kind of vicariously play just a little bit. And so we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that, the best ways to do that, the best practices when doing that. So, if you have a character, right? And let's just pick one here. If you are one of my players from my home game, you will recognize this name. Lena Curin here. She is a Ghostwise halfling, ranger / blood hunter. Fantastic character. I adore her greatly. I had an idea for her as a PC. Like forever ago, I was coming up with this idea, and I was like, oh man, this is really cool. I want to write this down. And then I was like, I'm never going to get to play this. Why would I get to play this? This would require the DM to let me do a couple of things early on that it just doesn't really make a whole lot of sense for it to do. So I was like, okay, tuck her away. But I had come up with a full backstory for her. I had come up with a full character sheet for her and everything like that. And then when I started this new home game, and by new home game, I mean the one that I've been running for 3 years now, I was like, oh man, I'm going to use some of these. And so she was one of them. I love her very much, and I put her directly into my game. So the way that I worked with her specifically is that I essentially sped through how I thought her story would go if I were the one controlling it. A little bit like just sort of like writing a story real quick for her, but thinking about it in terms of D&D, right? So the way that I have made and conceived of blood hunters in my game is that they, until they fill the thing that caused or that prompted them to make this like blood oath, whatever, they are driven like almost to a maddening extent to go and try and accomplish that thing. So she went ahead and she finished that. Great. She found this other path. Great. She met these other people. Great. And so I had all of these things going on in my head as I wrote down the rest of what had happened to her to bring her to where she is now. What I did not do, and this is the important part that I think a lot of DMs will be tempted to do, is I did not bring her all the way to fruition. She is in this setup here, and actually I need to update it because she should not be this level anymore. She should be much higher than this. She is a level 12 for when my party was traveling with her, around the time when they were the same approximate level. They were a little bit higher than she was, but like same general area. She was a level 12, which means that as a level 12, she had gone through a significant amount of adventuring, but there was more room for her to go. And realistically, if the party had not intervened in any way in her life, she would have continued on to be this great adventurer. She probably would have topped out at around level 16 or 17, I would say. No party intervention or anything like that. But so I didn't take her all the way there. I didn't get to the point where she is like fully realized into what she could be. Because if you do that, then theoretically you will have resolved all of the story threads that are attached to that individual. And you don't want to do that because then they just kind of exist. And they do stuff for reasons, but those reasons are not necessarily like deeply emotionally, personally driven reasons that make characters three-dimensional. And so with someone like her, I went ahead, I made her a level 12 because one, I wanted her to be able to help the party in a fight that they were going to be in, like be an actual asset to them. But also I wanted her to be able to like not steal the spotlight away from the party. That's the other thing. You don't want to throw a level 8 character in, or a level 8 NPC in with a party of level 3s, because that means that the level 8 individual is just going to like outshine everybody, and then the PCs are just standing there like, what am I here for? I don't understand. And so you want to go ahead and you want to take them up to, I would say, about 2/3 of the way done. Maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, but about 2/3 of the way done I think is about the sweet spot, because you have gotten over that center hump where you can dive up into the juiciest part of their story as part of the actual story beats. Again, some of my players watch this, so I'm not going to talk about what Lena's final story would be, but you can sort of take that and then bump it up just a little bit at the end there. There are a bunch of different ones that I did that with, and honestly, while I understand that player characters and like rolled characters like this are not necessarily great for enemies, it does allow you to kind of like scale them with the party as you go. So I have like a set of hunters that the party encountered early on that were a little bit higher level than they were, and they were going to maintain that little bit of a higher level with the party, but I wanted it to be a like fight that hurt, and so I made them rolled characters because they were going, or I didn't make them rolled characters. I pulled rolled characters that I had and I made them evil. That's what I meant. But I made sure that they stayed just above the party so that when the party was facing them, they were consistently going to be a little bit stronger. Now, the power gap lessens as you get higher in level, and so it feels like you are evening out and becoming as good as, or no, not Johnny. I just knocked one of my ducks off my microphone. I'm very sorry. Excuse me while I put that back on. There we go. Back to where you belong. Man, what was I saying? That power gap lessens so that you feel like you are improving and getting to be on the same level as these individuals. And eventually, you can let them just overtake them entirely. Because realistically, at the same time, a party of 6 PCs is going to outpace a party of 4 NPCs at a slightly higher level, no matter what. They were running into them at those lower levels, and so it was one of those things where they were terrifying to have to deal with. And that's just the way it went. Most of the NPCs that my players have run into at this point are actually characters that I have... let me rephrase. Most of the NPCs my players have run into and had lasting interactions with are adapted from player characters that I have rolled up and created, which means that I have stat sheets for obviously like 100 different or 100 plus different characters here. But that means that at any given point, also, I could feasibly, because I have leveled them out to the point at which my players would be interacting with them in the world. Some very, very high level, some very, very low level, some or most kind of in the middle. I have leveled them out so that my players can interact with them, and then at a moment's notice, I could go, okay, I need this sheet. This is what we're working with now. Like, if they are getting into a fight for whatever ungodly reason with the kindly old woman, who is the archdruid, I have a character sheet here for her, and she will wipe the floor with them for the most part. They are actually now level 17, so they might actually have a really good shot at that one. But the point is, because of all of that, they are now in the same... They have the ability to interact with them in a mechanical way that isn't necessarily there for just stock NPCs. And I did that with a lot of the major NPCs that they ran into. I adapted them into that because I knew that at some point they might decide, hey, you over there, we want you to come fight with us. And that is going to be a good time for everybody involved. And, you know, they did exactly that. They traveled with 4 different NPCs, maybe 5, through a besieged city, or through a city under siege, while they were underground in the sewer system. And I had just character sheets for all of them. They, by some miracle, made it out with they were doing this at level like 15. They made it out with the level 6 being still alive by some ungodly miracle. And part of that miracle is just the fact that they were fighting intelligent enemies who could recognize that guy is not as big of a threat. And so it's just kind of how it worked out. But I digress a little bit here. The point of what I'm saying here, really what it comes down to ultimately, is that the best way to get to use these characters that you have created and you have actually put a lot of time, effort, and love into at this point, is you take the idea behind them, the concept behind them, and you go ahead and you apply levels to them. You level them out to a point where they will have progressed their story, and you find a place in the world for them to logically fit. So the inventor that my party interacts with and they think is both fantastic to work with and absolutely maddening because he talks like he is high all the time. He has a stat block because he's a character that I conceived of years ago at this point, and I wanted to run with that. I wanted to see where he could go, and so he ended up getting leveled up. I built up his backstory a little bit more, and then I plopped him right in the middle of a space where I knew that the party would then frame him in an important light. That's another important part of it. Parties naturally are going to gravitate towards that guy in the corner over there, so you have to give them a reason to want to actually interact with some of the NPCs that you want to be major. Such as this inventor man who lives in a tree commune, like a literal tree commune. They live inside of the trees. He's the only person that has any metal there, and he just builds stuff. Like, you know, masks. That was the first thing that they asked him to build for them because he had just built them bombs. Why not, right? Why not? Why not? And so making sure that you keep what you think is interesting about the character, but putting that a little bit more on the sleeve of the NPC, because if it's buried deep down, unless the players like hyperfixate and get their claws into him, you're never going to see their backstory come to the light of day, really, at all. So you need to, 1, play them out in your brain, essentially, so that you get to a certain point. 2, determine what that certain point is level-wise, so that you have a stat block for them. And then 3, simplify them to enough to where your party is going to find them interesting, but not so much that they are going to find them flat and boring. And that's really the 3-step process. It obviously has a lot of sub-steps in each one of those, but that is kind of how it shakes out. That is how I do it, at least. I am consistently using these characters. I'm consistently coming up with more characters, and I have them just like banked to pull from if I need to. But then inevitably, when it comes up with a opportunity for me to play a new character, I just go ahead and I make a new one because I get excited. Like my most recent character, Belbin Elderberry, in a home game that I am actually a player in, I adore him with every fiber of my being. He is a thing that I created specifically for that campaign, in spite of the fact that I had 108 characters waiting in line behind him. So, you know, it just kind of happens sometimes. Okay, it just happens. But that is everything I have to talk to you guys about on that one. Make sure you remember those 3 steps. They are the best way, I think, to go ahead and actually get to utilize all of those PCs that you are creating in a way that is still at least somewhat satisfying to you. You don't get to explore their story fully, but you get to do it in your head, and then when the players go, oh man, we really like you, you go, yes, and then you get to make sure that they have a parallel storyline to your player characters. So, moving on to what we have in terms of shows coming out today. We have, get the fingers ready. There's only 4 of them, so I don't know. I'm getting the fingers ready too extensively. Dimension 20, of course, it's Wednesday. Knocked Prone, Venture Maidens, and Trials and Trebuchets. Go check those out, guys. Please let them know that I sent you, because again, one day somebody's going to say something to me about it, and it's going to be hilarious. I'm so excited for that. Yeah. I think it'll be a funny time. It probably won't be, but I think it will be. But with all that said, that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. So thank you so very much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it. And thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that make this show possible. And if you are interested in becoming one of my patrons, go ahead and follow the link in the description of this episode. Also, if you're one of my patrons, make sure you guys are suggesting shows, because you guys are the ones that determine what the Friday episodes are unless a book has come out that week. And we don't have another book coming out for a while here, really. So go ahead and get your episode suggestions in. And I right now am recycling some of the old ones, because we don't get like a flood of 15 of them at a time, but we get a couple of them, and so I'm trying to make sure that we get some of the older ones up again so that we can keep everybody happy. So anyway, go check that out. But as I mentioned, that is everything I have to talk to you guys about today. So with all that said, don't forget, everybody, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.